video is going to show you how to do Cisco Anyconnect machine cert authentication. I had a client ask me to do this a couple of years ago, and I did it. And lately, with password spray attacks and everybody's AD is in the dark web, I had another client come to me and say, "Hey, we want to hurry up and jump on certs real quick." I said, "Yeah, no problem. We've done this before. We'll put this together." And after about half a day, and I ended up having something wrong in my documentation, but I started looking around. And I thought, wow, I don't remember how I put all this together in the first place because I can't seem to find another source of this. There is a Cisco document out there, and it does mention the XCA software. I think there's some Barracuda firewall stuff that mentions it's being mentioned all over the place. Because I've done this for almost 30 years, and I can't tell you how easy it makes PKI. If you don't understand PKI or you're just scratching the surface of it, this will help you so much more get over that initial hump of this is kind of how all this works. But when they're generating certificates, the only example I could find from Cisco's documentation was to, we all put, I try to tell everybody use get, let's encrypt. Everybody puts GoDaddy or whoever their registrar is, wherever you get your certificate, you change that on the outside interface, the interface group, the security zone, whichever one you did it with in your version of Firepower on the FMC. But I just was, I guess that will limit to the company who can get into the VPN. What happens if you have people that don't work for the company that need to get into the VPN? There's some caveats there, and I don't think that they really explained that once you do that, you're going to knock everybody on the internet that isn't supposed to be in there, including people that might need to be in there eventually. So we're going to do everything in our internal domain with XCA. So with that, this can be done pretty quickly after you do it a couple times. Great thing to remember is this is a free piece of software. Again, go here, watch the 5-minute video. It's going to very quickly explain. Everybody knows the terms like root CA and signing certificates. And well, here it is. Some people might comment, oh, well, you're self-signing. Well, the root of every PKI infrastructure is self-signed. So you have to sign your certificate somehow. So this is how this is done. This is very easy. I'm going to start a new company. It's just a flat file database. For this instance, I'm just going to name it uh, dental.priv, the internal domain name, a customer of mine. This you want to be a pretty good password. I'm going to use 12345. That's right. I told you to use a good password. This is a demo. So now you basically have an empty PKI database, an empty PKI structure that you're going to start to fill in. Everybody knows that when you are doing your certificates, you have what state are you in, what locality, what country. The first thing I'm going to do is create an empty template and just get some of that stuff out of the way. Now, this is a customer that has stuff all over the world, so I'm going to actually specify at this time. Um, Again, I'm just kind of making this. Anything can go in here. You put ever. You could. This is supposed to be dental. I could have left it dental. It's not going to make any difference. Now later on, you're going to want to look at this and be able to tell what was going on, especially if you're doing it for a customer. If this is internal to your IT team and it's not that big of a deal, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're doing this for a customer, you want it to look nice too. So you would then go, let's say US, I'm going to say Chicago and this. Now, I'm not going to fill anything else out in here. You can't even generate keys because this is just a template. So none of this other stuff. This is just filling in the stuff that you don't want to do every time. And you'll see a really quick example of the 4 things we're going to do. I won't have to fill any of this in, this part of it again, these 4 things specifically. So here we go. So now we've created our dental privilege template. So now here we're going to create our root certificate. And you're going to say it's self-sign. I'm just going to leave everything. Everybody knows what all these mean. If you don't, you're way ahead of the game here by already jumping into this. You should really figure out what a lot of these algorithms, integrity, uh, uh, and all. Don't need to know in great detail, but you should know what you're talking about. So here's the template for the new certificate. You got a bunch of different templates. This is the template that we created, but it's really only for the subject. So when we're creating our root CA, we're going to sign it ourselves. We're going to choose that it's a CA and apply extensions. Because before this, if you went in here, this is at 1 year and there's nothing going on, there's no key usage. This is a way to tell you without having to memorize all of these different things that you need to tick on. You can just say, well, I'm creating a CA, apply extensions. Boom. Now you can see it went to 10 years. It's a certification authority. You see key usage starts to get filled in. The advanced comments get filled in. So let's do the rest of this. So then we did the default CA and we apply extensions. You do it a million times. Apply extensions. Now when you go in here and start messing with your extensions and you do this, they're all wiped out and it goes right back to this. It's a template. That's what it does. Dental priv. This is the name template that or subject template. Now you can go in here, I go in subject, and now everything's filled in here. Now, since this is the root, I know it's going to sound crazy, root CA. I'm going to say root CA, and then root. Again, this is an internal, means nothing address. One thing I did have an issue with, this took me several iterations. I wanted to generate a new key, and I wanted to change it to elliptical curve, and there's a whole bunch of different choices in here that you can use. I couldn't get one to work. Every single time, I don't know if it was Windows, I don't know if it's Cisco. I'm not a Windows user. I'm a Linux user, so I I very rarely spend time on a Windows box, but it could very well be the firepower. It did with the elliptical curve keys allow me to install, but onto the firepower, but I was never able to get a Windows machine to authenticate. So I'm just going to say remember as default for the purpose of this lab because I'm going to keep it all like this because I want it all to work. So you can see there, generated the key. And now I like to go in here and since it's my company, it's what I want to do, I can, my root CA, and if I'm going to use this for Anyconnect or remote access, I don't want to mess around with this. I don't want to mess around with this 20 years from now, but that starts to get to be a question of, and for some reason, these both need to be checked. This probably doesn't need to be checked, but I haven't gone back and done that one last test without it checked. Doesn't seem to uh, have any ill side effect for it. So this is what it looks like. This is going to be a CA. This is like Windows certificate properties. You'd get to see some of this stuff. So now we say OK, and now we've got a certificate. You can see the private key right there. You can see the certificate. It's a root CA. That's the name of the certificate. So I'm going to, while clicked on this, hit new certificate. And you will see now it says use this certificate for signing. So the root CA that we self-signed is now going to sign the sign CA. So the CA that we have that will be signing, Bill, PC1, Steve, Todd, Nancy, PC2, those will all be signed by sign CA. So after the root CA has got a self-signed cert, then you sign the sign CA cert, and then everything else below that, and then all you have to do is trust the root CA and the sign CA, and then all the certificates will work. It's really not as complicated as everybody makes it out to be, and this tool really helps gets that across. So I'm going to create another CA here, our sign CA. It's going to be signed by the root CA. So I'm going to set my templates up with CA, apply extensions. I know it's going to go for this company. So I'm going to apply the subject, and now just to verify, I can go in here and see this is filled in. This is filled in. I know it's CA because there's CA. There's the 10 years. So I'm going to say sign CA. Same exact thing as the root CA, except this has now been signed by another certificate, not signed itself. Generate, this is already the default. Boom. Now this is signed. So, and we'll look at this in a little bit here. You can go in here later and see that this signed CA was signed by root CA. Now, excuse me. In these directions, you'll see that the next thing you want to do is we're going to create a VPN. We're going to create a certificate for the actual device itself, and it will have not a CA template, but the WebTLS server template. For some reason, I also need to go into extended key usage and make sure that client off, because web server doesn't usually do client off. It usually does, I think it's like server, it's the server side of it, not the client side of it. We'll show you here in a second, but this is actually the thing that makes you not have to enroll in the firepower. You don't actually have to go in and create a CSR while you're on the firepower. What I'm going to do right here, I've clicked here and say new certificate, so it should now be saying use this certificate for signing, sign CA. I could do root CA, but that's not going to help this. So following the instructions, we do the TLS server and apply extensions. I already know that it's going to be part of this company, so then I'm going to apply subject. I'm going to say, I'm just going to call it the, I have not tested this calling it anything other than what it's supposed to be right there. And I just keep following this pattern, knowing that I'm going to be able to generate a key for this and then have a PKCS 12 files, so a PFX file that needs to be imported and exported with a key. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'll just leave this at 365 days for now. You see the DNS, this is the SAN, it's looking for the copy of the CN, which is here. You'll see the key usage, again, hit those critical buttons. And this is the web server authentication, web client authentication I also put on here. So both criticals, that needs to be on all the certificates you create with this tool. You don't have to worry about the key usage and extended key usage if you've used the templates correctly. Because right now we've only created a root CA, a signing CA that was signed by the root CA, and now we've created a certificate that was signed by the signed CA. So if we say okay, and there's the certificate. So now what we're going to do is this certificate we're going to export, and because it is a chain, this is all the way to the top. It's a PKCS12 file, so it's going to ask us, hey, you need to give me a key here. And we're just going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not what this should be. Yours should be something else. So now we have a file that is so here's the XDB, that's the flat file for this program, and here's your PFX. And when we come out of this with a certificate that is a PFX and it goes all the way up, we can end up, I've already imported it in here, but I'm going to show you guys how you can do it. There's really two ways to do this. The first time I did it, I had these directions. I had these notes actually in the correct order, and I had messed up the beginning of this. But this is where I ended up figuring out, okay, there's really two ways to do this, and that's because this article right here, which I believe is the one I mentioned at the very beginning of this, uh, getting rid of the certificates off the outside interface. I think that's where this document here is the one that tells you to do it. But in that document, I discovered there's a way in one swift motion that you can do it, or you can do it with these two here. I'll just very briefly go in. If you go into your object management and your PKI and your cert enrollment, this is the one I'm using. I'm calling it an identity. And cert enrollment here is what we know as trust point. So I created this trust point by going in here and saying I'm going to call it identity. It's a PKCS12 file. This is the file that we created earlier. And then I put in the import password. Skip check for CA flag. That has been mentioned in other documents. I do it here. I'm pretty sure it is needed for this to work. And the SSL client. And then none of these three will have anything in them because once you do this, you browse to it, choose this file, and then say, okay, it takes a couple seconds, it spins, and then it pops right in if your password is correct. None of these other three fields need to be played with, done anything with, nothing. So then you're sitting here and it looks like this, whether or not your certificate is good or not. This is what it's going to look like. I put a self-sign certificate in here, one that I did manually. It doesn't matter. This is just where you're creating your trust points. If you need to create a CSR, things like that. After you do that, you go into certificates and then say add, and mine happens to be in an HA pair, and that's where you would choose the trust point that you just created. When you click on that and then say add, this will take a few minutes. It'll fail inside 60 seconds if it's not correct. If it is correct, what you will end up with is both of these should look, so now you can see identity, yeah, trust point. For people that have been doing Cisco ASAs and before that PIXs and concentrators, I don't understand why they just didn't keep calling this a trust point. But so anyway, now you can see this was the whole chain. The CA is signed by the signed CA is signed by the root CA, and that's on the CA magnifying glass. If you go into the certificates, you can see signed CA issued to the one that we did in our XCA. If we want to go into the recent, I think I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, signed CA vpn.gumbrand.com. The 20, yep, dates are all right. Everything's in here. Now we're good to go. So once this is good, you are free to start going into your remote access and going into your connection profile and assigning your AAA to be client certificate only. Now, where does this CA that we put on here has to have a certificate for the machine? And that's where we can get out of here. That's all it is on the Cisco side. I mean, if you're going to do certificate authentication and you have everything else, there's a million different help things that you can do for that to have your certificates become something that you can use. Uh, you can see, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can see on Cisco's website, all kinds of documentation how to get certs to work with regular Anyconnect stuff. So I won't go too far into that. So in order to add your cert to Windows, what you're going to end up doing is going into the exact same database, because that is the CA that we told the firepower to trust. So we're going to go into sign CA. And if you wanted to, you could do a certificate signing request. It's kind of silly because we would just sign it with this CA that we're going to submit the CSR to anyway. So now I'm going to go in here and say new certificate. I want it signed by the signed CA, just like I did with the VPN certificate, except this time I'm going to say TLS client. Now you understand why we went through the example earlier on the extensions. I'm not going to go over this in great detail, but now we've used this extension, and this extension. So for the client certificate, we're going to use the client extensions, and we know it's going to go to a client of this company, so we're going to apply that subject. Now we can go in here and say Corp PC cert, and the common name will be the same thing. You can even just do the same thing. Of course, we will generate a key for that as well. And let's go into the extensions. And now this is where you might want to, let's say we want this guy to have this for 3 years. Let's say we'll apply. And it's an end entity. We want to go in here and say critical. And then we're ready to go. Now we have our cert that goes on to the PC. User cannot put this cert on the PC. This has to be, now of course you can, it's full chain again, because we're going to want the sign CA and the root CA and the private key of the Corp PC cert, so it can be used. So again, this should not be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now we have a third file, and this is the P12 for the file that's going to go onto the Windows PC. So now we have the on the desktop. We have, this is a certificate, of course, that we brought over from XCA that we exported. It's the PFX. If you're an admin, you can right click and install PFX, and issued by root CA. In the trusted root, it put our root CA, which was issued by our root CA and is valid until 44. And then put the PC certificate that we want to use in our local certificate store. And it's got the little key there, which means we have the private key. It's a big bundle, and we can use it for things like authenticating to this tunnel. This is just a tunnel that I set up that has two methods, two-factor, I guess. There's a local username and password on the firepower that I've configured, and it needs to use a certificate. That this certificate came from the same shared sign CA that is on the firepower, not on the outside interface, not just on there as another part of the PKI that's being used by the firepower. So here's this cert. We've double clicked. It's popped all these things. If this is a non-domain joined PC, if you're going to join this domain, join this PC to a domain, this is probably not the way I would do this. I'd put it in a GPO. and you'll be able to use the import key. When you right click on this and say install, it's going to go next, 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 next. Give me the import key. 12345 is the one we used before, and then it's going to dump all these things in the perfect places. If you use a GPO, you're going to use that import key, be able to pop these three things into these three places in a GPO, and then you push it out to all your users, and nobody even knows that they all now have certs that they got installed and certs that they trust. So now that we've installed this, it's on here. This is what we got from our XCA. Um, our XCA being the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the super secure. So here's our Corp PC cert. So here we go. In the XML file, the profile XML file that comes down, there is an option to not allow your users to select their own certificates, just automatically selects it. But I put this in a way that this would be available for this demo. So you say, okay, and I already know that that's a good thing because I never would get to the user prompt if there was something wrong with the cert. So I'm going to be able to pop in here and there we go. So now I am connected. This is just from an install. You can do the same thing on a phone. It's done exactly the same way. Pretty sure it's done the same way because I only use Android, so I'm assuming it's done the same way on an iPhone. So that is using your own CA machine certs with Cisco Anyconnect.